A mysterious man approaches the life of a young woman in an unexpected way, and each gesture holds a secret capable of changing everything she believes about her own story. The hot Miami sun beat down on the asphalt as Michael Bennett adjusted the rearview mirror of his rental car for the third time. His hands, accustomed to the soft touch of the leather steering wheel of his Mercedes, now sweated on the cheap plastic of the ordinary vehicle he had been driving for almost a week. It was strange how something so simple could make him feel so out of place, as if he had suddenly been transported to a parallel universe where he was no longer the powerful real estate businessman, but just another rideshare driver on the busy streets of the Florida metropolis. The cell phone on the console rang, announcing a new ride. He took a deep breath, feeling his heart race. It was her. After 5 days of making random trips throughout the city, the algorithm had finally conspired in his favor. He accepted the ride with a quick tap and headed to the address indicated in Riverside, a working-class neighborhood that contrasted with the luxurious high-rises of Brickell, where he maintained his penthouse apartment. "Stay calm, Paul," he repeated to himself, using the fake name he had adopted for this personal mission. "You've waited 22 years for this moment." As he drove through the busy streets, children ran on sidewalks, vendors sold refreshments, and life pulsed with an authenticity he hadn't experienced in a long time. Michael observed everything with renewed eyes, like someone rediscovering a city he knew only superficially, despite having been born there. In his social circle, he rarely needed to venture beyond the wealthy neighborhoods of the southern coastline. He arrived at the address and parked in front of a small 3-story building, painted faded yellow, with clothes hanging on improvised clotheslines in the windows. He sent the standard message from the app, "Your driver Paul has arrived." And then he waited, trying to control his breathing, mentally rehearsing what he would say, how he would behave. That's when he saw her coming down the building stairs. Emily Martinez carried a heavy backpack and walked with the posture of someone who had matured too quickly. Her black curly hair was tied in an improvised bun, and she wore simple jeans and a t-shirt from the State University. Something in the way she walked, in the way she adjusted the strap of her backpack on her right shoulder, made Michael feel a lump in his throat. It was like looking at a mirror from the past, at traits he himself had in his youth before money and power softened them. She approached the car, checked the license plate, and got into the back seat. "Good morning," she said with a firm voice. "To Jackson Memorial Hospital, please." Michael adjusted the rearview mirror to better observe her. "Good morning. Can you confirm your name, please?" he asked, following the app's protocol but actually wanting to hear her voice pronouncing her own name. "Emily," she answered, distracted by her phone. "Emily Martinez." Hearing that surname, Sarah's surname, not his, caused a twinge of guilt that Michael tried to disguise by starting the ride on the app. "Traffic's complicated today," he commented, trying to sound casual. "It might take a bit longer to reach the hospital." Emily sighed, putting away her phone. "No problem, I left with plenty of time. I have my mum's appointment at 10. He wanted to ask about Sarah, about the illness he knew she was facing, but he needed to be cautious. "I hope it's nothing serious," he risked, looking at her through the rearview mirror. She gave a tired smile. "Kidney disease. We're on the transplant list, but in the meantime, it's 3 hemodialysis sessions per week." Michael felt the weight of that responsibility on Emily's young shoulders. At 22, she carried more worries than many executives who worked for him. "It must be difficult, balancing studies, work, and still caring for your mother," he commented, turning onto a main avenue. Emily raised her eyebrows, surprised by the comment. "How do you know that I study and work?" Michael realized his mistake. He was going too fast. "Oh, your university t-shirt, and you look like someone who does 1,000 things at once," he improvised, feeling awkward in the lie. She relaxed a bit. "Yeah, it's not easy. I'm studying nursing at State and work part-time at a cafe near campus. But we make it work, always." The resilience in her voice moved him. How different would Emily's life be if he hadn't abandoned Sarah while pregnant 2 decades ago? If he hadn't yielded to the pressure from his traditional family, who saw that young domestic worker as a threat to the good name of the Bennetts? The journey continued with sparse conversations. Michael absorbed every detail, the way she bit her lower lip when thinking, just like him, how she gesticuled when talking about her college professors, the way her face lit up when she mentioned her dream of becoming a specialized nurse in nephrology, inspired by her mother's condition. And you? Have you been working as a rideshare driver for long? She asked, out of politeness after talking so much about herself. I started recently, he answered, attentive to the traffic. I'm trying something different. I see. Tired of the office? Michael smiled ironically, thinking about his office on the top floor of the Bennett Business Center with a view of the ocean. Something like that. I needed to better know the city, the real people. The real people, she repeated with a light laugh. You talk as if you lived on another planet before. In a way I did, he admitted, slowing down as they approached the hospital. Sometimes we live in bubbles, you know, and we don't even realize how much world exists out there. The car stopped in front of the main entrance of Jackson Memorial Hospital. Emily grabbed her backpack and opened the door. Thanks for the ride, Paul. It was a pleasant conversation. Michael felt the urge to reveal everything at that moment, but contained himself. It wasn't the place, nor the time. The pleasure was mine, Emily. Good luck with your mum today. She nodded and closed the door. Michael watched her enter the hospital, walking with determination, her shoulders straight despite the invisible weight she carried. Something inside him changed at that moment. The plan he had coldly formulated, to gradually approach her to assess whether it was worth recognizing the daughter he had never acknowledged, now seemed petty in the face of this young woman's strength. He picked up the phone and cancelled all his meetings for the day. He decided to stay there, waiting to offer a ride back. It was the least he could do for now. While waiting, he called his assistant. I need you to research everything about kidney transplants, he ordered. I want to know how to accelerate a process. Who are the best specialists in the country, everything. On the other end of the line, his assistant seemed confused. Sir, are you having kidney problems? No, Michael replied, watching the entrance of the hospital. But someone important is. He hung up the phone and leaned back in his seat, preparing for a long wait. For the first time in decades, he felt he was doing something that really mattered. He didn't know how he would be received when he finally revealed his true identity, but he was willing to risk everything. His reputation, his comfort, his meticulously planned life, for a chance to know this young woman who, unknowingly, carried his blood and, ironically, much more of his strength than he had ever shown. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We continue. In the following 2 weeks, Michael managed to become Emily's regular driver for her trips to the hospital. It wasn't difficult to manipulate the app's system, considering his contacts in the tech world. With each trip, he discovered more about the young woman, her eclectic musical taste, from indie folk to alternative rock, her passion for American literature, especially Toni Morrison, her dedication to studies, even after sleepless nights caring for her mother when she felt unwell. On a particularly hot Friday morning, Emily got into the car looking more tired than usual. Everything okay? Asked Michael, genuinely concerned. Rough night, she replied, settling into the back seat. Mom had a high blood pressure crisis after hemodialysis. I spent the night awake monitoring her. Michael felt his chest tighten. And you're still going to work? Emily shrugged, as if that were just another detail in her challenging routine. The rent doesn't pay itself. And I have a pharmacology paper due today. He swallowed hard, thinking of the millions accumulating in his accounts, while they struggled for every penny. During the drive to the cafe where Emily worked, Michael gathered courage to take the first step of the plan he had been formulating. Emily, I hope you don't find me intrusive, but I have a friend who's a nephrologist. If you want, I can see if he can take a look at your mum's case. She stared at him through the rearview mirror with a mixture of surprise and suspicion. You barely know me, Paul. Why would you do this? The question caught him off guard. For a moment he considered telling the truth but backed off. I lost my mother to a disease that could have been treated if we had access to better doctors. I don't like seeing other people going through the same thing. It wasn't a complete lie. His mother had indeed passed away after a prolonged illness, although the family had access to the best treatments available. Something in Emily's gaze softened. I'm sorry. It's just that we learn to be suspicious when things seem too good to be true. She hesitated. If it's not too much trouble, I appreciate the help. Michael felt a relief mixed with guilt. It was a beginning, a door slightly ajar. On the following Saturday, there was no scheduled ride. But Michael decided to drive by the riverside neighborhood, driven by an almost obsessive need to be close to his daughter's life. He parked the rental car at a safe distance from the building where Emily lived and observed the street activity, feeling simultaneously like a protector and an intruder. That's when he spotted an elderly man with gray hair and sun-marked skin helping Sarah get out of a taxi. He recognized her immediately, despite the 22 years that had passed. Thinner, with a face marked by fatigue, but still with that determined look that had attracted him so much in the past. The man accompanying her must be Uncle Joe Williams, the neighbor who, according to Michael's research, had become a father figure to Emily. Something in the scene, the gentleness with which the man supported Sarah, the familiarity between them, provoked a pang of jealousy in Michael. That simple man had been present in his daughter's life while he built financial empires. The contrast between their choices had never seemed so stark. His cell phone rang, bringing him back to reality. It was his assistant. "Mr. Bennett, I managed to schedule an appointment with Dr. Miller for Monday. He's the best nephrologist in the Southeast." "Excellent," Michael replied, still watching Sarah and Uncle Joe entering the building. "And the other matter? About the anonymous transfer? It's been done as requested. $10,000 have been deposited into Ms. Martinez's account. No trail leading back to you." "Perfect." Michael hung up the phone, satisfied with the first step of his plan to financially help Sarah and Emily without raising suspicions. On Monday, during the ride to the university, Emily seemed more animated. "Something unbelievable happened, Paul," she commented, leaning forward. "Someone deposited money into my mom's account. $10,000 out of nowhere, no identification, no explanation." Michael feigned surprise. "Wow, and you have no idea who it might be?" "None. Mom worked as a housekeeper in wealthy homes for years before she got sick. She thinks it might be one of her former employers." Emily paused. "Whoever it is, this will pay for 3 months of rent and the medications that insurance doesn't cover." The relief in her voice made Michael momentarily feel justified in his clandestine approach. But soon the guilt returned. He was building a relationship based on half-truths. "I'm happy for you both," he said, trying to sound casual. "Seems like you have a guardian angel." Emily laughed. "It would be nice to believe that. But in real life, nobody gives anything for free. I'm wondering what the catch is." Her suspicion was understandable and painfully ironic. Michael desperately wanted to prove that his intentions were genuine, but how could he do that without revealing who he really was? In the following weeks, Michael intensified his presence in Emily's life. He managed to become her driver for practically all her movements, creating a routine of conversations that slowly evolved from trivialities to more personal matters. They talked about dreams, fears, hopes. He told adapted versions of his own life, maintaining the essence of his experiences, but altering details that could reveal his true identity. During one of these rides, the first slip occurred. Emily dropped a pen between the car seats and, while looking for it, found a keychain from a luxury brand that Michael had forgotten to remove. "Is this yours?" she asked, examining the Italian leather object with the discreet but unmistakable symbol of one of the world's most expensive brands. Michael felt his blood freeze. "Oh, that? It was a gift." Emily twirled the keychain between her fingers. "Expensive gift for a rideshare driver." "It was from a passenger," he improvised. "An elderly lady I helped with groceries. She insisted I keep it." She returned the keychain, but her gaze revealed doubt. "You have an interesting life, Paul. You know specialist doctors get expensive gifts from passengers." There was a tone of suspicion in her voice that Michael couldn't ignore. "Life sometimes brings surprises," he replied, trying to stay calm. "I wasn't always a driver, you know, so I had another life before." "What kind of life?" "One that didn't make me as happy as being here, meeting people like you." The answer seemed to disarm her temporarily, but Michael knew he had planted a seed of curiosity that could complicate his plans. At the end of that week, after dropping Emily off at the hospital to pick up Sarah after hemodialysis, Michael noticed Uncle Joe observing him from the sidewalk. The man's gaze was penetrating, as if trying to solve a puzzle. For a frightening moment, Michael feared being recognized. After all, 22 years ago, when he had abandoned Sarah while pregnant, Uncle Joe was already her neighbor. His fears began to materialize when, upon returning to pick up Emily and Sarah, he found the elderly man waiting alongside them. "So you're the famous Paul," said Uncle Joe, extending his hand with excessive firmness. "Emily talks a lot about you." "Uncle Joe," protested the young woman, visibly embarrassed. Michael shook the man's hand, feeling the calluses from decades of manual labor. "It's a pleasure to meet you, sir." "You remind me of someone," commented Uncle Joe, without releasing his hand, his eyes fixed on Michael's. "Are you sure we've never met before?" Sarah, who until then had remained silent, studying Michael with intensity, intervened. "Joe, leave the young man alone. So let's go, I'm tired." Throughout the return journey, Michael felt the weight of Sarah's gaze through the rearview mirror. There was something in the way she observed him that suggested not a vague remembrance, but a growing certainty. He kept the conversation on safe topics, asking about the treatment, offering to stop at the pharmacy if they needed. Upon reaching their destination, Uncle Joe helped Sarah out of the car, while Emily looked for money in her purse to pay for the ride. "No need," said Michael. "This one's on the house." Uncle Joe gave him a suspicious look. "Very generous of you, young man." When everyone had already left, Sarah leaned into the passenger window. "Thank you for your kindness, Paul. Or should I call you by another name?" The question, made with a mixture of irony and challenge, left Michael speechless. Before he could respond, she walked away, leaning on Uncle Joe's arm, leaving him with the uncomfortable feeling that his disguise was beginning to crumble. Sarah's question echoed in Michael's mind as he drove back to his luxury apartment in Brickell. "Or should I call you by another name?" That simple phrase suggested she had recognized him, despite the time, the physical changes, the beard he now cultivated. Or perhaps it was just a bluff, a feminine intuition, trying to unmask a stranger who showed excessive interest in her daughter. Upon entering his apartment, Michael felt the contrast between the two worlds he now inhabited. On one side, the sophisticated minimalism of his duplex penthouse, with panoramic views of the ocean. On the other, the narrow streets of Riverside, the simple building where his biological daughter had grown up without ever tasting the comfort his fortune could provide. He poured himself an expensive whiskey and walked to the balcony. Below, the lights of the shoreline drew a golden line against the dark Atlantic. He thought about how different his life would be if he had chosen to stay with Sarah 2 decades ago, if he had confronted his traditional family instead of yielding to pressure. His cell phone rang, interrupting his musings. It was Jennifer, his ex-wife. "Michael, I've been trying to reach you for days. What's going on?" "Rebecca said you cancelled the meeting with the Chinese investors, and no one can find you at the company." Jennifer spoke in the executive tone she had adopted even after the divorce 3 years ago. The 15-year marriage had produced robust bank accounts for both, but no children, a biological impossibility of hers they discovered too late. "I'm taking some time for myself," he replied evasively. "Richard is taking care of everything at the company." "Time for yourself?" The incredulity in her voice was palpable. "Since when does Michael Bennett take time for anything other than multiplying his assets? Are you sick? Did you have some crisis?" The genuine concern in her voice touched him. Despite the divorce, they maintained a sincere friendship. "I'm fine, Jennifer. Just rediscovering some parts of myself that got left behind." A thoughtful silence on the other end of the line. "Does this have to do with that ex of yours before you met me? The one who was pregnant?" Michael felt the impact of the question. He had never told Jennifer about Sarah and the pregnancy. "How do you know about that?" "Your father told me, shortly before he died. Said it was the biggest favor he ever did for you, getting you away from that inappropriate young woman and the alleged pregnancy." Those were his words, not mine. Anger rose like a hot wave. Even from the grave, his father could still manipulate his life. "It wasn't alleged, Jennifer. It was real. And yes, I'm trying to fix the biggest mistake of my life." After hanging up, Michael spent hours planning his next move. The consultations he had scheduled for Sarah with renowned specialists, the anonymous deposits that would ensure basic comfort for both women, everything needed to be accelerated. His instinct told him that he wouldn't have much more time before his disguise was completely discovered. The next morning, Emily was waiting for him on the sidewalk in front of the building, more serious than usual. "Good morning," she said, getting into the car. "To the university today, please." Michael noticed the change in treatment. There wasn't the warm smile, the casual conversation. Something had changed. "How's your mother?" he asked, trying to initiate a dialogue. "She had a restless night," Emily replied, looking out the window. "We received another anonymous envelope, this time with $20,000 and a letter saying she secured an appointment with Dr. Miller, the famous nephrologist." Michael's heart raced. He had planned for his assistant to deliver that envelope only the next day. "That's amazing, isn't it?" Emily turned to face him. "Paul, do you have anything to do with this?" The direct question caught him off guard. "Me? Why would I?" "Because everything started after you appeared in our lives. Because you were the one who mentioned having a nephrologist friend. Because my mom keeps looking at you in a strange way, as if she's seeing a ghost." Michael swallowed hard, keeping his eyes on the road. "Emily, I really just want to help. If I manage to get a doctor friend of mine to see your mom, what's the problem?" "The problem is that you're lying about who you are." She crossed her arms. "Uncle Joe said you look like someone from the past, someone who hurt my mom." A heavy silence took over the car. Michael felt the pressure growing in his chest. Was it the moment of truth, or should he continue with the original plan of gradual approach? "Emily, No," she interrupted. "I don't want to hear more lies. If you're really trying to help, I respect that. But there's something you're not telling me, and until I find out what it is, I prefer to keep my distance." The rest of the journey was made in uncomfortable silence. Upon arriving at the university, Emily quickly got out, but before closing the door, she leaned in and said, "My mom asked me to give you this. She said you'll understand." She handed him a small yellowed envelope and left without looking back. With trembling hands, Michael opened the envelope. Inside there was an old photo, yellowed by time. In it, a Michael 20 years younger smiled next to Sarah, in front of a Miami beach. On the back, a single handwritten phrase, "Some debts cannot be paid with money." The message was clear. Sarah had recognized him, and no financial amount would erase 2 decades of abandonment. That afternoon, Michael didn't return to pick up Emily at the university. Instead, he drove to a place he hadn't visited in years, the small apartment where he had met Sarah when she worked as a housekeeper for a family friend. The building was still there, more worn by time, but recognizable. It was at that moment, looking at the building that had witnessed the beginning of everything, that Michael decided to abandon the disguise. It was time to face the consequences of his past choices, however painful they might be. Upon returning to his apartment in Brickell, he found Uncle Joe waiting in the reception. The doorman, embarrassed, explained that the gentleman had insisted on waiting, saying it was a family matter. "I knew I'd find you here, Michael Bennett," said Uncle Joe as soon as they were alone in the elevator. "I recognized you from the first moment, despite the beard and the years. You have the same eyes as the girl." "How did you find me?" asked Michael, resigned. "I had the taxi driver follow your car yesterday. Then it was just a matter of asking the doorman who the penthouse resident was. It wasn't difficult." The elevator reached the penthouse, and Michael invited the man in. Uncle Joe observed the luxury of the apartment with an impassive expression. "Nice place," he commented dryly. "Must be big enough to house about 10 families like ours." Michael served him coffee, which the man accepted with a brief nod. "What do you want, Uncle Joe? Are you here to threaten me? To charge me for the years of absence?" The elderly man sipped his coffee, taking his time. "I'm not a man of threats, young man. I came because I promised Sarah I would try to understand what you intend by showing up like this, after so long. Did she send you?" "No." Uncle Joe placed the cup on the coffee table. "She doesn't know I'm here. In fact, she asked me not to interfere, said you and she have accounts to settle without an audience." Michael took a deep breath. "And Emily, does she know who I am?" "Not yet. Sarah wants to be the one to tell her, when the time comes. But the girl isn't foolish, she's putting the pieces together." Uncle Joe leaned forward. "What I want to know is, what do you want from her? Why all this theater? Why didn't you present yourself directly as the rich and powerful man that you are?" The question was fair. Michael walked to the window, observing the sea. "I wanted to know her first, to find out what kind of person she had become, without the shadow of my name. My money. I wanted to be sure. Sure of what? That she deserved your recognition." Uncle Joe's voice hardened. "That girl never needed you to be who she is. Sarah raised an extraordinary daughter alone while you were here, accumulating all these—" He gestured to the luxurious apartment. "Expensive toys." "It's not that," Michael defended himself. "I wanted to be sure that I wouldn't ruin her life by showing up out of nowhere. I wanted to approach gradually, build a relationship before dropping this bomb." Uncle Joe stood up, walking until he was face to face with Michael. Despite the difference in height and his advanced age, there was a dignity in the simple man that made Michael feel small. "Listen carefully, young man. I've known Emily since she was born. I held that child in my arms while Sarah cried because you had disappeared. I saw every tooth that grew, every fever, every school achievement. She's like a granddaughter to me." He paused, his eyes watery. "If you're here to play with her feelings, to satisfy some late curiosity, and then return to your golden world, it's better to disappear right now." "It's not that," Michael affirmed firmly. "I want to be part of her life. I want to help Sarah. I want to fix my mistakes." "Some mistakes can't be fixed, son. Only consequences that we need to face." Uncle Joe headed for the door. "Sarah will seek you out. She wants to talk to you before telling the girl anything. And some advice: when that moment comes, leave the lies aside. Emily values truth above all else." After Uncle Joe's departure, Michael remained for hours contemplating the ocean. The confrontation had been painful but necessary. He felt exposed, vulnerable, but strangely relieved. At least now he no longer needed to pretend to be someone else. That night, he received a message on his cell phone. It was from an unknown number. "Tomorrow 3 p.m. Riverside Cafe on Flagler Street. Come as yourself. Sarah." Michael reread the message several times, feeling the weight of each word. Come as yourself. Not as Paul, the rideshare driver, not as the anonymous benefactor, but as Michael Bennett, the man who had abandoned a pregnant woman 22 years ago and now sought redemption. He lay down without being able to sleep, mentally reviewing everything he would say to Sarah the next day. He knew that their meeting would determine his chance to truly know the daughter he had never had the courage to acknowledge. The Riverside Cafe occupied the ground floor of a restored historic building, with dark wooden tables and a decoration that blended rustic southern elements with contemporary touches. Michael arrived 15 minutes before the scheduled time, choosing a discreet table at the back of the establishment. He had exchanged the simple look he had adopted as a driver for his usual well-cut suit, although he had opted for a more discreet model, without the gold cufflinks and ostentatious watch he normally wore. He ordered an espresso and waited, trying to control the anxiety that made his hands tremble slightly. Several times he mentally rehearsed what he would say, but all words seemed inadequate, given the magnitude of the moment. At 3 p.m. sharp, Sarah entered the cafe. Even thinner and with visible signs of the disease she was facing, she maintained the elegant posture and penetrating gaze that had captivated him so many years ago. She wore a simple blue cotton dress and carried a small purse. Her hair, now with grey strands, was tied in a low bun. She located him immediately and walked to the table with firm steps, despite her apparent fragility. Michael stood up reflexively. "Sarah." "Michael." She sat down, refusing with a gesture the help he offered to pull out the chair. A heavy silence settled between them, laden with 2 decades of absence. "You look different," he finally said. 22 years do that to people." Her voice was calm, without the resentment he expected, but also without any warmth, especially when those years include raising a daughter alone and fighting against a chronic disease. Michael lowered his eyes. "I'm sorry. For everything." "Being sorry doesn't change anything." Sarah called the waiter and ordered a lemon balm tea. Then she turned to Michael. "Let's get straight to the point. Why did you come back? Why this elaborate approach, pretending to be a driver?" "I wanted to meet Emily without the weight of the past, without her knowing who I was initially. I wanted to see what kind of person she had become." "And what did you think?" asked Sarah, with a hint of maternal pride in her voice. "She's extraordinary. Strong, intelligent, determined. Much more than I ever was at her age." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "On that, we agree. Now, what do you intend to do? Have you already assessed whether she's worth entering your privileged life?" The acidity of the question hit Michael like a slap. "It's not like that, Sarah. I never wanted..." "Never wanted what, Michael? Never wanted to abandon a pregnant 20-year-old woman? Never wanted to obey your father when he offered me money to disappear? Never wanted to ignore all the letters I sent informing about your daughter's birth?" The waiter brought the tea, momentarily interrupting the tension. Sarah thanked him with gentleness, a contrast to the hardness she directed at Michael. "I was young and cowardly," he admitted, when they were alone again. "My father threatened to disinherit me, cut off my education, said he would ruin your life if I insisted on the relationship. I yielded to the pressure. It was the biggest mistake of my life." "And the letters? Was it also your father who intercepted them?" Michael felt his throat tighten. "No, those were on me. I was building a new life, met Jennifer. We were engaged. I was afraid that everything would crumble." Sarah sipped her tea, her eyes never leaving his. "At least you're honest now. Late, but honest. When I found out about your illness, I realized that I might not have much time to know my daughter, to try to fix something of what I ruined." "How did you find out about my illness?" "I hired a private investigator about a year ago. I wanted to know how you were doing, if you needed anything." Sarah laughed without humor. "A year observing from afar, and only now decided to act. What changed, Michael?" He took a deep breath. It was time for the complete truth. "I was diagnosed with a heart condition. It's not fatal, but it made me rethink a lot of things. The possibility of passing away without ever knowing my own daughter became unbearable." Something in Sarah's gaze softened, if only for an instant. "I understand. Fear makes us look at our choices differently, doesn't it?" "Exactly." Michael hesitated, then continued. "I know I have no right to ask for anything, but I would like to know Emily properly, as her father." Sarah carefully placed the cup down. "It's not that simple. Emily grew up having Uncle Joe as a father figure. I always told her that her biological father had died before her birth." Michael felt the impact of the revelation. "You told her I was dead?" "It was easier than explaining that you simply didn't care." Sarah sighed. "Over time, the lie solidified. It became our truth. And now? Now we have a problem. If I tell the truth, she'll know I've lied her entire life. If I continue lying, I'll be denying her the chance to know her biological father." Sarah looked out the cafe window, observing the movement on the street. "Besides, there's the money issue." "What money?" "The anonymous deposits, the expensive medical consultations that appeared out of nowhere. I know it was you, and Emily suspects it too. She's intelligent, Michael. She's connecting the dots." He nodded. "I don't intend to hide that. I want to help you both, financially, emotionally, however possible." "Why? Out of guilt? Fear of death? Or because you really care?" The question hit him deeply. Why was he really there? Was it just the fear of passing away without resolving pending issues? Or was there something more genuine in his desire to reconnect? At first, maybe it was guilt, he admitted. But after meeting her, seeing the incredible woman she's become thanks to you, it's much more than that. I want to be part of her life, yours too, if you'll allow me. Sarah studied him for a long time, as if evaluating the sincerity of his words. "It's not me you need to convince, Michael. It's Emily." "So you'll tell her?" "I will. Tonight." Sarah took the last sip of tea, but with one condition. "Which one?" "You will be present. You'll look into her eyes while I destroy the image she has of the past. You'll face whatever reaction she has. No running away this time." Michael felt a shiver run down his spine. The prospect was terrifying but fair. "I accept. Come to our apartment at 8. And Michael..." Sarah stood up, adjusting her purse on her shoulder. "Leave your credit card at home. This isn't something you can buy." After Sarah's departure, Michael remained at the cafe for almost an hour, reviewing the conversation, mentally preparing for the evening meeting. He called his assistant, cancelling all commitments for the next few days. This would probably be the most important meeting of his life, and he couldn't allow himself any distraction. At 7:30 in the evening, he parked his own car, a discreet Mercedes, not the ostentatious Porsche he also owned, a few blocks from the building where Sarah and Emily lived. He walked slowly, observing the neighborhood with new eyes. The children playing on the sidewalk, neighbors conversing in improvised chairs in front of the houses. The simplicity and authenticity of that community life he had never experienced in his luxury condominiums. Upon reaching the building, he hesitated before pressing the intercom. Once he climbed those stairs, there would be no turning back. His life would change forever, in ways he couldn't predict. Are you going to stand there all night? The voice came from the external staircase. It was Uncle Joe sitting on one of the steps smoking a pipe. I was just preparing myself, Michael replied. The elderly man took a puff, observing him with perceptive eyes. Nobody is ever prepared to face the consequences of their own actions, son, but you have to do it anyway. Are they waiting? They are. Sarah told Emily everything about an hour ago. The girl cried, shouted, then fell silent. Now she's waiting for you to hear your side. Michael felt his stomach sink. How did she react to knowing that I wasn't dead? Uncle Joe stood up, tapping his pipe to clean the ashes. How do you think? How would you react if you discovered that your entire life story was based on a lie? Do you think I should go up now? It doesn't matter what I think. What matters is what you're going to do. Uncle Joe gave him a pat on the shoulder. I'm going to my house. You three need privacy, but I'll be nearby if Sarah or the girl need me. Michael watched the man slowly walk away, then took a deep breath and pressed the intercom. Sarah's voice sounded metallic through the device. You can come up. Each step seemed heavier than the previous one. On the third floor, Sarah was waiting for him at the door, her face marked by emotional fatigue. She's in the living room, she said simply, giving him passage. The apartment was small, but organized and welcoming. Photos of Emily at different ages decorated the walls, moments of a life he had completely missed. High school graduation, school trips, birthdays, and then he saw her. Sitting in the furthest armchair in the living room, her eyes red and swollen, but her chin raised in defiance. Her eyes, the same eyes he saw in the mirror every morning, fixed on him with a mixture of anger, confusion, and curiosity. Emily, he said, his voice almost failing. So you're Michael Bennett, she replied without getting up. The millionaire businessman, the man of the anonymous deposits, the ghost my mother said was dead. There was no accusation in her voice, just a cold statement of the facts. Yes, he confirmed, without trying to defend himself. It's me. Emily looked at her mother, then back at him. Why did you decide to show up now, after 22 years? It was the question he feared and for which he needed to offer the complete truth, because I realized I was losing the most important thing I've ever had in my life, a daughter. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We continue. A heavy silence fell over the small living room after Michael's declaration. Emily stared at him with an intensity that made him feel transparent, as if she could see through decades of social masks and emotional defenses he had built. A daughter, she repeated, with a touch of irony. Interesting how you only remembered that now, after 22 years. Sarah sat next to her daughter, placing a hand on her knee in a silent gesture of support. Michael remained standing, feeling out of place in the small apartment that housed more family history than his entire mansion in Brickell. May I sit? He asked, indicating the nearest chair. Emily shrugged. It's my mum's house. Sarah nodded, and he took a seat, maintaining a respectful distance. I know that nothing I say will justify my absence, Michael began, choosing his words carefully. But I'd like you to know the truth, as ugly as it may be. That's all I want, Emily replied. Truth. I've had enough lies for a lifetime. The look she gave her mother didn't go unnoticed by Michael. There was hurt there, a wound freshly opened by the revelation that her father wasn't dead as she had always believed. I met your mother when she worked for a family friend, he began. I was 24, recently graduated in business administration, starting to work in the family business. Sarah was 20. We fell in love quickly, intensely. Sarah looked at a fixed point on the wall, as if the memories were also coming back. We kept the relationship secret for almost a year. I knew my family would never accept it. The Bennetts have a tradition of appropriate marriages with people from the same social circle, but I was willing to confront them, or at least I thought I was. Emily leaned slightly forward. What changed? Your mother became pregnant. Michael swallowed hard. When I told my father, his reaction was violent, not physically, but he threatened to destroy not only my future, but Sarah's as well. He said he would use his influence to ensure she would never get a job in Miami again, that he would contest the paternity, that he would drag us through years of costly legal battles. And you believed him, Emily concluded. Worse, I gave in. Shame tinged Michael's words. I convinced myself it was better for everyone, that I could provide financial support without getting directly involved, that my father would eventually accept with time. But he never accepted, Sarah intervened, breaking her silence. And you never came back. Michael nodded, accepting the accusation. At first, I still tried to keep track from a distance. I sent money through intermediaries. But Sarah returned all the envelopes. I didn't want handouts, Sarah explained, looking at her daughter. I wanted him to take responsibility, to be present. When I realized that would never happen, I decided to cut all ties. And then, asked Emily, turning to Michael, in the 20 years that followed, what happened? Did you completely forget you had a daughter? The direct question hit him like a punch. I didn't forget. I buried it. I built a separate life, got married, divorced, built a financial empire. I tried to fill a void that nothing could satisfy. Poor rich man, Emily said ironically. I deserve your sarcasm, Michael admitted. Every drop of it. I'm not here seeking forgiveness or understanding. What are you seeking then? Her gaze was penetrating, challenging. A chance to know you, to be part of your life, even if it's late, to help your mother with her treatment. Emily abruptly stood up, walking to the window. The view gave onto a narrow street where children were still playing, despite the hour. You really think you can show up after 2 decades, throw money at our problems and expect everything to work out? No, Michael replied firmly. I know nothing will be simple or quick. I know you have every right to reject me, to hate me. I just ask that you allow me to try. Why? Why now? Emily turned to face him. What's the real reason? Michael hesitated. The complete truth included his heart condition, but mentioning that now would seem like an attempt at emotional manipulation, to arouse pity. I lost my father 2 years ago, he said. His death made me question many choices. I realized I was following in his footsteps, prioritizing money and status above real connections. I started investigating, trying to find you both. And it took you 2 years to create the courage to show up? It took me 2 years to admit to myself what I had done, to accept the magnitude of my mistake. He took a deep breath. And yes, there is another reason. I was diagnosed with a heart condition. It's not immediately fatal, but it made me confront my own mortality. Sarah gave him a surprised look. He hadn't mentioned this detail in their previous conversation. So that's it, Emily concluded. You're afraid of dying without clearing your conscience. Partly, Michael admitted. But there's more. When I started following you as a driver, when I met the incredible person you've become, I realized it wasn't just about relieving my guilt. It was about you, about the chance to have a daughter in my life. Tears began to stream down Emily's face, the first he had seen her shed. You don't even know me. But I want to. Deeply, if you'll allow it. Sarah stood up, walking to her daughter and embracing her. You don't need to decide anything now, honey. We have time. Do we? Questioned Emily, looking at her mother. With your kidneys failing. With him, she pointed to Michael, with heart problems? It seems like time is exactly what we don't have. The observation, painfully accurate, hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Michael felt the weight of lost opportunities, of wasted years that would never return. That's why every moment matters now, he said. I don't want to lose anymore. Emily wiped the tears with the backs of her hands. And what exactly do you propose? That I start calling you Dad? That I spend weekends at your mansion? That I show up at social events as the lost daughter of the great Michael Bennett? I propose we start slowly. A coffee, a lunch, conversations. No pressure, no expectations. And what about the money? The anonymous deposits, the expensive doctors, all that? Michael looked at Sarah, seeking guidance. She nodded slightly. I want to help with your mother's treatment, not as a way to buy your affection, but because I can, and because it's the right thing to do. If you prefer, I can find a more transparent way, less manipulative. A thoughtful silence took over the room. Emily looked at her mother, then at the photos on the wall, finally returning her attention to Michael. I have conditions, she said finally. Which ones? He asked, feeling a flash of hope. First, no lies, never again, neither to protect me nor for convenience. She looked significantly at her mother, who lowered her eyes. Second, you can help with her treatment, But I don't want your money for myself. I'm going to finish college on my own merit. Michael nodded, respecting her independence. Third, this stays between us for now. No public announcements, no introducing me to your family or friends until I'm ready. I need to process all this at my own pace. I agree with everything, Michael promptly replied. And lastly, Emily hesitated, her voice softening slightly. I want to know you too. The real you, not the rich businessman or the fake driver. I want to know who my biological father is, to better understand who I am. The last condition caught him by surprise. It was more than he expected, more than he believed he deserved. I'll open my life to you, he promised. No filters, no masks. Emily extended her hand in a formal gesture that reflected the strangeness of that new relationship. Then we have a deal, Michael. He noticed that she didn't use Dad, and understood that title would need to be earned, not simply granted by biological ties. He shook her hand, feeling the firmness of her grip, the determination she had certainly inherited from both her mother and him. Can we start tomorrow? He risked asking. I've scheduled an appointment for your mother with Dr. Miller. We could go together. Emily looked at Sarah, who nodded almost imperceptibly. All right, but we go at my pace, is that clear? Crystal clear, he replied. When Michael left the apartment, it was already past midnight. The conversation had extended, with Emily asking questions about his life, his family, his work. Cautious questions, maintaining emotional distance, but revealing a genuine curiosity about the man who had contributed to her existence. In the hallway, he found Uncle Joe, who had apparently waited the entire time. So? Asked the elderly man. She's incredible, Michael replied with sincere admiration. Strong, direct, intelligent. Just like her mother, observed Uncle Joe. Are you sure you're ready to have someone like that in your life? Someone who will question everything, who isn't impressed by money or power? Michael smiled, for the first time that night. I'm not ready. But I want to be. Good, approved the elderly man, because if you hurt that girl again, you'll have to answer to me before answering to God. The veiled threat was said with such tranquility that it left no doubt about its seriousness. I won't disappear this time, Uncle Joe. I promise. The elderly man gave him a pat on the shoulder. Words are easy, young man. Now you need actions. Michael went down the stairs, feeling strangely light despite the emotional weight of that night. He had no illusions that it would be easy. Emily had made it clear that she would need time, that trust would have to be built gradually. Sarah still carried decades of justified hurt, and he himself had much to learn about being a father, about being part of a family that wasn't based on appearances and social conventions. But for the first time in a long time, he felt he was on the right path, that all the wealth he had accumulated meant nothing compared to the opportunity now presenting itself, to know and be part of his daughter's life. Upon arriving home, instead of serving himself his usual expensive whiskey, Michael picked up the phone and called his doctor. It was time to take his heart treatment seriously. He had renewed reasons for wanting to live longer and better. 3 months passed since the night of the revelation. Fall had arrived in Miami, bringing occasional rains that refreshed the persistent heat. Michael parked his car in front of Mercy Hospital, one of the best in the city, and checked his watch. He still had 15 minutes before the scheduled time, but he preferred to always be early for appointments with Emily and Sarah as a way to demonstrate his commitment. Sarah's treatment had evolved significantly in recent weeks. Access to the best specialists and a premium health insurance provided by Michael had transformed her quality of life. The new medications better controlled the symptoms, and the possibility of a transplant had become more concrete, with her inclusion on a priority list. Michael got out of the car and walked to the hospital entrance where Emily was waiting for him. In the last few months, their meetings had gradually become less formal and tense. They started with silent coffees and superficial conversations, evolving to lunches where they shared stories of the past and joint visits to Sarah in the hospital. Good morning, Michael greeted her, noticing that she seemed more rested. Since she had secured a full scholarship to complete her studies, anonymously sponsored by a foundation that, in reality, was funded by Michael, Emily had been able to leave her job at the cafe and dedicate herself fully to her studies and caring for her mother. Good morning, she replied with a small smile. Mum is already in the exam room. Dr. Miller said he has news. They walked side by side through the hospital corridors, a space that had become familiar to both. "How were your college exams?" asked Michael, genuinely interested in his daughter's academic progress. "I think I did well, especially in pharmacology, which was the one that worried me most." She hesitated for a moment. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something related to college." Her cautious tone aroused Michael's curiosity. "Of course. What is it?" "An exchange opportunity came up, a semester in Boston, studying new techniques in nephrological nursing." Emily looked at him sideways, evaluating his reaction. "It would be perfect for my specialization, but you're worried about your mother," Michael completed, immediately understanding the dilemma. She nodded. "I can't leave her alone, especially now that the transplant could happen at any moment." Michael carefully considered his next words. In the last few months, he had learned to respect Emily's independence, to not try to solve everything with money or influence. "What if she wasn't alone?" he suggested. "We could hire a trusted nurse, full-time, and I could adjust my schedule to be more present." Emily stopped walking, turning to face him. "You would do that, reorganize your life because of her?" "Because of you both," he corrected gently. "Emily, I know we're still building our relationship and that you have reasons to doubt my constancy. But I want to prove that I'm here to stay, that you can count on me." Something in her gaze softened. "I need to think. Talk to Mom." "Of course, no pressure." They resumed walking, and Michael felt a wave of gratitude for the simple fact of being there, walking beside his daughter, being included in her decisions and concerns. It was more than he deserved, and infinitely more than he expected 3 months ago. They found Sarah in the waiting room of the doctor's office, distractedly leafing through a magazine. Despite the disease, she seemed stronger, with more color in her face. The new treatments were having an effect. "You two," she commented, seeing them arrive together. "It still surprises me to see how similar you are when you're side by side." It was true. The more time they spent together, the more evident the similarities became. The same eye shape, the same gesture of running a hand through their hair when thoughtful, the same contained laugh. Dr. Miller received them in his spacious office. He was a middle-aged man with a calmness conveyed by decades of medical experience. "I have excellent news," he announced after the initial greetings. "Ms. Martinez's latest tests show an impressive stabilization of renal function. The new medication protocol is working better than we expected." "Does this mean I won't need the transplant anymore?" asked Sarah with hope in her voice. "It's still too early to categorically affirm," pondered the doctor. "But we've gained time. A lot of time. At this rate of improvement, we can delay the need for a transplant for years, possibly." Emily squeezed her mother's hand, her eyes watery. "That's amazing." Michael remained silent, absorbing the news with an emotion he hadn't expected to feel. In the last few months, Sarah had gone from a figure from his past, laden with guilt and remorse, to someone he genuinely cared about again. After the consultation, they decided to celebrate the good news with lunch at a restaurant near the hospital. It was the first time they went out together for a meal, the three of them in public. "So," Sarah began while they waited for their dishes, "Emily told me about the exchange in Boston." Michael looked at his daughter, who seemed slightly uncomfortable. "We're still talking about it." "I think she should go," Sarah declared, surprising them both. "Especially now, knowing that my condition is stabilized." "But Mom," Emily began. "No buts," Sarah interrupted, with the gentle authority she had always exercised over her daughter. "You've postponed too many dreams because of me. This is a unique opportunity for your career." Emily turned to Michael, as if seeking support. It was the first time she had included him that way in a family decision, and the gesture touched him deeply. "Your mother is right," he said cautiously. "The international experience will be valuable for you. And as I said before, we can ensure that Sarah has all the necessary support during your absence." "I don't want to be a burden to anyone," Sarah protested. "You would never be a burden," Michael replied, with an intensity that surprised everyone, including himself. "Sarah, I know that 22 years of absence aren't erased in 3 months, but I'm committed now, not just to Emily, but to you as well. To the family we should have been from the beginning." An emotional silence followed his words. Sarah studied him with eyes that had seen too much to easily accept promises, but something in her expression softened. "Boston is a beautiful city," she commented finally. "I visited briefly when I was young before I met you. The change of subject was her way of accepting, without explicitly saying so, Michael's proposal. "Perhaps we could all visit Emily during the exchange," he suggested, testing the waters. "A small family trip." "Family," Emily repeated, as if testing the weight of the word. "We're still learning to be that, aren't we?" "Yes," Michael agreed, "and I'm grateful for each day of that learning." The dishes arrived, interrupting the emotional moment. The meal proceeded with a lightness they hadn't experienced before. Emily shared stories from college. Sarah talked about the books she was reading during hemodialysis sessions, and Michael told some anecdotes from his days as a university student. At the end of lunch, Emily excused herself to use the restroom, leaving Michael and Sarah momentarily alone. "She's beginning to like you," Sarah commented, watching her daughter walk away. "I noticed that," Michael replied, "and it's more than I deserve." "Yes, it is." Sarah took a sip of water. "But Emily has always had a bigger heart than mine, more willing to forgive." "And you?" he risked asking. "Any chance of forgiveness?" Sarah considered the question seriously. "Forgiveness is a process, Michael. It doesn't happen overnight, especially after so long." "I understand. But," she continued, "I'm willing to try, for the months you've been present, for the changes I see in you, mainly for Emily's sake." Michael nodded, respecting her honesty. "Thank you for that and for raising such an extraordinary daughter, even without my help." A small smile appeared on Sarah's face. "She is extraordinary, isn't she? Sometimes I wonder how I managed." "You're an amazing woman, Sarah. You always were. I was a fool for not fighting for you both." Before she could respond, Emily returned to the table. "What are you talking about? You look so serious." "About the past," Sarah replied, "and perhaps a little about the future." After lunch, Michael insisted on taking them home. The journey to Riverside was filled with light conversations about the neighborhood, the changes in the city over the years, the memories that each street evoked for each of them. Upon arriving at the small building, Michael was surprised to be invited up for coffee. It was the first time he had received such an invitation, having always said goodbye on the sidewalk on previous visits. The apartment seemed different in daylight, more welcoming and personal. Small details he hadn't noticed on the tense night of the revelation now stood out. The well-cared-for plants on the balcony, the books organized by color on the bookshelf, the photographs of Emily at different stages of life. While Sarah prepared coffee in the small kitchen, Emily led Michael to the photo shelf. "This is me at 5, she said, pointing to a photograph where a little girl with braids smiled without her front teeth. "It was my first day of school." Michael observed the image with a mixture of admiration and sadness for everything he had missed. "You were adorable. And this was at my high school graduation." She indicated another photo, where a teenage Emily wore a cap and gown, hugging Sarah and Uncle Joe. "Uncle Joe looks very proud," Michael commented, noticing the radiant smile of the elderly man. "He was always present," said Emily without accusation, just stating a fact. "At school presentations, during childhood illnesses, in difficult moments." "I'm grateful to him for that," Michael replied sincerely, "for having been what I should have been." Emily looked at him with an expression he couldn't completely decipher. "You know what he told me after that night when we formally met?" "What?" "That it's never too late to rebuild bridges as long as you're willing to make the most difficult crossing first." Michael reflected on the wisdom contained in those words. "He's a wise man." "Yes." Emily hesitated, then continued. "I've decided to accept the exchange." "It's a good decision," Michael supported. "It will be a transformative experience." "But I have one condition," she added, with a touch of the same negotiating tone she had used 3 months ago. "I want you to promise that you'll take care of your health, that you'll strictly follow the heart treatment." The genuine concern in her voice moved him more than anything else that day. "I promise," he replied, his voice slightly choked. "Good," she approved, "because now that I finally have a father, I want him to last a long time." It was the first time she had called him father, even if indirectly. The impact of that simple word made Michael need to contain unexpected tears. Sarah returned with the coffee, and the three sat in the small living room, talking about preparations for Emily's exchange, about the next steps in Sarah's treatment, about plans that, for the first time, included the three as a family unit. When the afternoon advanced and Michael needed to leave, He said goodbye with the promise to return the next day to help with the exchange documentation. On the way to the car, he met Uncle Joe, who apparently was returning from shopping. "How are things, young man?" asked the elderly man with the familiarity he had developed in recent months. "Improving every day, Uncle Joe," Michael replied, with a genuine smile. "Improving more than I deserved." The elderly man nodded with approval. "That's how it works. Life rarely gives us exactly what we deserve, be it good or bad. It gives us opportunities to grow if we know how to seize them." "I'm trying," Michael assured. "I can see that." Uncle Joe gave him a pat on the shoulder. "Keep it up. Those two deserve someone who doesn't give up easily." Michael watched the elderly man climb the stairs of the building, carrying his grocery bags with the dignity of someone who had always assumed responsibilities, even when they weren't originally his. Upon entering the car, Michael didn't immediately head home. Instead, he drove to the shore, parking in front of Miami Beach. The sun was beginning to set, tinting the sky orange and pink, reflecting in the waters of the Atlantic. He walked on the sand, shoes in hand, feeling the sea breeze on his face. He thought about how his life had changed in recent months. At the office, his employees noticed a transformation. He was more patient, more present, less obsessed with profits and immediate results. At home, the emptiness he had always felt in his luxurious apartment was beginning to be filled with new photos. Emily at her recent graduation, Sarah being discharged after a hospitalization, the three of them together on an outing through old Miami. It was a new beginning, not just for his relationship with Emily and Sarah, but for himself, a chance to be the man he should have always been. Not just a successful businessman, but a present father, a reliable friend, someone capable of valuing human connections above material achievements. The path would be long. Emily's trust was still fragile, the reconciliation with Sarah just beginning. But for the first time in decades, Michael Bennett felt he was on the right track. The man who had once abandoned his responsibilities out of fear and cowardice was now willing to rebuild bridges, to make the most difficult crossings, to be present even when it was uncomfortable. As the sun disappeared on the horizon, Michael made a silent promise to the ocean, to the women he had rediscovered, and mainly to himself. This time he wouldn't run away. This time he would stay. For whatever came, for whatever time they had, be it short or long, easy or difficult. Because some journeys, however late they may be, are worth every step of the way.